Welcome, this is SharePoint Patterns and Practices webcast, and this time we have again something really cool to show, which is an open source community initiative around a Visual Studio extension for SharePoint framework. And the people who've been actually started this work are Eric Chubbs and Paul Scheffelin, who are in the call as well. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a senior program manager from SharePoint Engineering. And like mentioned, Eric and Paul are the main presenters of today. So we'll see this extension live, and Eric's going to do the demo, and Eric and Paul is going to explain where the idea came from, what does it actually provide, and what are we planning to do with this one in the future. But let's start with an introduction. So Eric, who are you?
Thank you, Vesa. My name is Eric Schubbs. I'm a SharePoint MVP, focused mainly on the developer space. I've been around for quite some time, president of Binary Wave, mostly do apps and extensions for SharePoint, and all around general yeoman developer work.
Sounds good. You absolutely have been around for quite a long time, because we've known for quite a long time as well in the past. And Paul, jumping to you as well.
Yes, I've been around quite a long time as well. I'm an Office Server and Services MVP based in Chicago. I do a lot of the architecture work, solution architecture work, meaning talk with developer teams about what's the best approach to do things in the SharePoint or Office 365 platform, and why should we do this versus that. So a lot of interaction with them, and a lot of questions about, hey, why do I have to learn all this new stuff? So the Visual Studio extension fits into that crowd very well.
Absolutely. One comment to make actually on Paul, you seem to be, you're an independent consultant, or you have your Scheffelin Consulting. Why did you choose to use Solution Architect as your title? Because you can actually choose whatever title you want. So.
Oh, well, you know, I used to put janitor because I do have to empty the garbage can in the office. But that's most of the work I'm doing, right, is trying to help people design how to solve their problems.
That's fair. I think it's more official, Solution Architect. But anyway, so I'll let Eric and Paul do the presentations and walk through the slides, and we'll do this live demo. I'll jump in every now and then for asking any questions which pop up on my mind as well. But I think Eric will take it away from here, and let's see what this fuss is all about.
Right. So as I mentioned a little bit before, right, there's been a lot of confusion with people who have done SharePoint development for a while. I have to learn this new tool chain, and the benefits of the tool chain are well documented, and I'm sure you can learn more about it. But again, if I'm trying to get my job done, learning that new tool chain can be helped, right? So the idea around here is that we have an IDE. Visual Studio does JavaScript development. Visual Studio can run all these extensions, and so the idea was to help get something more familiar to people. And the idea here is that since the framework, or since Visual Studio is extensible, why not snap into that? And there's actually some prior art. There was a CKS Dev initiative that both Eric and I dabbled with in the SharePoint 2010 timeframe. So there's really kind of a common paradigm here for what people are doing. And then the other goals that we wanted to do here is, right, this yeoman command line does have a lot of things that have to be typed, a lot of things you have to get right. And so we can certainly abstract that away and take care of that by providing a typical wizard interface, right? And then lastly, you can see we have a goal to support Visual Studio 2015 as well as 2017. So although the demos today are in 2017, we certainly are targeting the Visual Studio 2015 as we go forward.
Yeah, and part of what I've been hearing, a lot of feedback from enterprise customers, as I'm sure you have as well, is the framework looks interesting. It's neat, the stuff we can do, but we're an enterprise organization and we have very structured ALM processes, and we have to use Visual Studio as our IDE, and this needs to fit in with our other SharePoint solutions that we're building, or it has to go into our MS build process. We have to use TFS, et cetera, et cetera. And the open source kind of modern web development tools don't fit well into these very structured enterprise environments. It's all well and good to say, well, let's learn something new, and that is a great thing. But when you have 30 or 40 or 50 devs in an enterprise, you have to have standardized practices. People can't just be going off and doing their own thing as part of those environments. And they spend a lot of money and time and effort creating these processes and procedures, and we giving them sort of a oddball out of left field here to create something new really is that it's not a comfortable fit. It doesn't work well. And so there was a lot of friction there around implementation and details of how we make this stuff happen. I think everybody's excited, or at least everybody I've talked to is excited about what we can do with the framework and the web parts and things that we can build, and they don't mind using the JavaScript and HTML as their all UI and client-side driven stuff. It was just the tool chain that was causing a lot of difficulty. And as Paul mentioned, because Visual Studio is extensible, there's really no reason, especially in 2017 with its improved support for Node.js and NPM and Gulp and all those web extensions, there's really no reason we can't do this in Visual Studio. And so that's why Paul and I got our heads together and said, let's just solve this problem and bring an extension to the community that does this in a way that's more comfortable for a traditional developer.
Absolutely, and maybe one thing more to add on that one as well, that obviously from an engineering perspective, we do understand the learning curve around the Yeoman templates and the modern web stack development and everything else. And this is a great tool to ease up the transition. So you will be still in the familiar Visual Studio IDE as well. So it's an option to use. And a great thing about this one, we'll go through that in a detail. This still works, or it has been implemented in a way that it's always still using the latest and greatest in a Yeoman template perspective. So you're still using the exact same engines as you would be using if you were to using, for example, Visual Studio Code. So great implementation from that perspective.
Right. And another thing that I like about this, when I run the Yeoman generator and I get this folder and I get lots of files, the Node packages folder gets very large. A lot of those files are to support the development environment locally on your machine. The actual code that you need to focus on to deliver your solution is a subset of that. And by hiding that in Visual Studio Explorer, it kind of focuses on what I need, not so much on infrastructure that's supporting what I'm doing. So we'll see that in the demo too. That's another great thing. The why we build it slide here, we have some of this we've talked about already, just to cover in here. One thing that we didn't necessarily talk yet is the bottom bullet point here, in that as I'm writing code, it's common that I'm going to be doing JavaScript in SharePoint and I need to call to some service. Well, that service might be part of the same application I'm building. And so I might want to have the SharePoint web part in the same Visual Studio solution as my web service that I'm calling. So this kind of enables that to happen as well.
One of the big use cases that I'm seeing is Azure deployment. Visual Studio has the very best Azure integration tools that are out there. And it's super simple to right-click and deploy a new Azure web app. You can even integrate with Azure AD and do all that good Azure stuff from within the IDE. But it requires that you're building traditional Visual Studio Web API or MVC type of solutions into Azure. For the most part, you can use other stacks as well, but that's where the tool chain fits best. And it's a struggle. When I sat down and started working with the framework, I tried to say, okay, I'm going to deploy this to Azure. I want to spin this up on an Azure endpoint. Well, I couldn't not easily, because I was going to Visual Studio to do my stuff for Azure, then switching back over to VS Code to do my stuff for the framework. It was not a comfortable development experience for me, and it definitely wasn't a good ALM story because my code was in multiple places. By being able to combine that into a single solution framework, I now have everything where I need it to be. I can check it into TFS. I can manage my work items and tasks that I need to do with the team. And so it's much more of that traditional process that we've become used to that works across multiple project types.
Absolutely makes sense.
And one of the beautiful things about how this is architected, if you're familiar in the command line, if you're comfortable doing Node or NPM, there is an Azure CLI that you can integrate, so it'll fit your style. We're targeting those who aren't familiar with that platform. They're more comfortable in the Visual Studio environment, and we just want to help them out. So again, we don't want to say who has to use this or who why, right? Again, if you are more familiar with the C#, ASP.NET, Visual Studio paradigm, this could help you, right? If you have, as Eric has mentioned, if you deal with all types of enterprise ALM processes that you already have and you can do all that work inside Visual Studio, we want to help enable you to develop for the new SharePoint framework in addition to that, right? And again, not trying to replace anything, but if you're familiar with this, this should be a natural extension for you.
It's important to point out, I think, that we're not, with this initiative, trying to replace the existing tool chain that's there. We're not trying to get you to use Visual Studio instead of VS Code or not use the Yeoman generators from the command line. You can continue to do so. This is simply an extensible layer that if you're more comfortable with Visual Studio as an IDE, as I am, as I know a lot of other people are, if you need those additional components, we allow this to plug into it. Once you've generated one of these projects, you can still jump in with VS Code if you want and modify the project. You can still run from your command line. It's not preventing you from doing any of those things. It's interchangeable with that, and it's really just designed for people who like living in the heavyweight client-side IDE for all the other things that Visual Studio brings you that you're comfortable with, or for those who must do that because it's part of their prescribed tool chain.
Yeah, absolutely, and personally, that's really the key reason why I really like this, the architecture of this extension, because it's not a yes or no. It's like if you want to use it, it's going to help you. If you don't want to use it, that's fine as well, because obviously in larger projects there are different kind of people and developers as well. Some might feel that they want to use this. Some might feel that they want to use Visual Studio Code or whatever alternative editors. So absolutely makes sense.
So let's talk a little bit about what's actually running here behind the scenes. First of all, this is an open source project, so we invite participation from the community on this. The way that we built it was specifically designed to run in conjunction with the existing tool set. Visual Studio has an extensibility framework in the term of Visix that allows you to create custom project types and item templates, and there's a whole managed extensibility framework. For those who remember this back in the SharePoint 2010 days, you could extend the out-of-the-box development tool chain for doing F5 deployment with your own custom types and whatnot. That was also developed as Visix solution. So we've taken the existing Visual Studio extensibility framework and extended it into the SharePoint framework projects. When you run a framework project from the command line, the first thing that you get in the Yeoman generator is a set of questions about how you want your project to be built. What should be the solution name? What should you name the components? What type of framework are you using, etc. We've added a Windows Forms layer to that so that you can see those options in a visual interface, and also give you some additional capabilities that we'll show you in the demo, such as adding common strings like skip install for do rapid project scaffolding and whatnot. This does not in any way replace the Yeoman generator. It's not a customized or proprietary method of building out the framework. We didn't take what was in the generator and break it apart and do something different. Behind the scenes, it's still the Yeoman generator running. In fact, there's a switch option in the form where you can run the command line and see it actually running in the command window space. If you like, change the command string and all that. So we've tried to facilitate whichever way you would like to use that. If you're more comfortable seeing the command line run and watching it draw out the big Yeoman and do that stuff, you can absolutely do it inside of this extension. In addition to the build the project and get the project going, we also wanted to make it easier for folks who are familiar with the F5 debug experience to do that one click. My project is built, let me F5 it, launch gulp serve, take you into your browser where you can start working with the workbench. And so we've included as part of the templates a default launch command line for gulp serve that will have the same experience as if you type gulp serve from the command line. In addition, if you would prefer maybe a more structured approach to that, Visual Studio now includes the Task Runner Explorer, so you can bind into these build tasks, including gulp serve in the Task Runner Explorer, and launch it from there to get that same workbench experience. So there's a couple of different ways that you can interface with the tool. On a go-forward basis, whatever the advantage, and one of the main reasons we wanted to extend what was happening in the Yeoman generator and not do any replacement is whenever the product team makes a change or introduces a new feature into the framework, shortly thereafter we will update the extension so that those capabilities will also come into Visual Studio. We don't have to go through a big rebuild process for that. As long as there's extensibility into those features that they build into the native Yeoman generator, we'll be able to add those into the extension framework.
And that's going to be less risky than it might sound, because the third person on this call, Vesa, can certainly understand what we're doing, and if there's enhancements coming, help make sure that there's a communication between us so that we don't have any issues.
Yes, indeed. So that's really one of the reasons why this initiative is also under the SharePoint PnP umbrella, and the work happens in the SharePoint organization, is that we in engineering, we absolutely will make sure that we keep this up to date, and we'll make sure that Eric and Paul are up to date on things, what's happening, and the additional people who are hopefully joining on this initiative as well. Because I think there's massive potential on this extension to grow as a de facto model and extension for those who want to use the Visual Studio IDE with SharePoint framework. So massive potential on that side.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. We should make it clear that this is just an initial effort. This is just a basic extension capabilities here for what comes out of the box. There's a lot of things that people could do with this. I can envision that for folks who have really involved ALM processes, that they may want to branch this and do a customized version of it for their own needs, and that's perfectly fine. We would also love to hear feedback from people on how they're using it and ways that they're making it extensible. So this is in the spirit of PnP, we're getting it started and sort of pushing the boulder up the hill to start making this happen. We'd love to see people jump in and keep it rolling.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and we have a slide on this later, but I would just point out I can envision I want to right-click into add new item, and I want to add a React component. And so what kind of scaffolding or what kind of boilerplate React component can I use? I know that Office UI Fabric has got some samples, and so we would love help the people who can grab some of those sample components and maybe bundle it in an item template just to help bootstrap developers who are new to the React world instead of ASP.NET.
Yep, absolutely. And one long-term dimension could be just as well that we're looking into actually open sourcing the Yeoman templates as well. So at that point, the extension and the Yeoman templates are open sourced and coordinated by the same people. So that gives, again, additional options for the future. But we'll move on this journey step by step by enabling these things, and hopefully sooner or later we have a massively great setup in both sides.
So let's look just visually what we're doing in the tool here. We want this to be a familiar file new experience for Visual Studio developers, and you could certainly do that. We've added a new project category called SharePoint Framework for the web part project, and additional project types, should they ever be included in the Yeoman templates, will show up here. As you step through the wizard, we give you a tabbed control here where you can set up your inputs. As you can see here, the 4 standard inputs for building a solution. We've added a couple of additional options, as I mentioned, like the skip install command line flag, which you can add here by ticking this checkbox, which you may or may not be familiar with. But what that does is it skips running the npm install, which really takes the longest amount of time in doing your new project setup, because it has to download all of those onto the local machine. So you can run the skip install for rapid scaffolding. And then there's an advanced tab that allows you to modify the command string. And this is where it becomes really apparent that we're working with the native tool set, because we're calling Yo Microsoft SharePoint and passing in the parameters to the command line for it, along with any additional commands. So if you want to do things like yarn, for example, as part of your process, you could do -- skip install and yarn and have a custom command string for whatever it is you want to include in here. By default, it will run behind the scenes. You'll just see the Visual Studio project setup green bar running from left to right until it's done. Or if you'd like to actually see it as you would in the command line, you can tick the show command window and generate, and it'll actually launch the window for you to see it running in real time.
Cool, really cool stuff. So I think the best way to actually see that one is no doubt doing this in practice as a live demo. We wanted to have those screenshots in the presentation for reusability perspective as well. But I think it's good just flip on the Visual Studio and see this one in practice.
Yeah, so let's jump into a Visual Studio window. So here we have a new Visual Studio project that we've or IDE window that we've opened. We're just going to go to New Project. You'll see the SharePoint framework here under the Office SharePoint section and the SPFX Web Part project. You can change, obviously, the name and solution name and whatnot here. Now, I should point out that the solution name that you pick here will automatically be applied to the template in the generator. So when you're naming it here, pay attention to what you're naming the solution name, because as you'll see on the next screen, we add that in automatically and gray that panel out. And that's so it properly wires up the whole folder structure with the way that Visual Studio creates it on the system with the way that the generator works. So I'm just going to choose the defaults that I have here and click OK. The next screen that you'll see here is our wizard box. Here's the solution name that we've applied. We can pick our framework. These are the default ones that are supported by the generator. If and when new ones get added, we'll update them here as well. And we can give it a component name, part, or let's just call it Web Part 4, and we'll add a description, my custom web part. Now, this is the option to run the skip install. I'm going to check it for what we're doing here so we can do a rapid scaffolding, because the full thing takes about 10 minutes or so for it to run and download everything to create our project. So we're just going to do a basic scaffolding. And as I mentioned, that all that does is skip the npm install of the node modules when it's creating your solution. You can still go to the command line afterwards, run npm install in that directory, and it'll bring down everything that you need for the node modules. Looking over on the Advanced tab, here is the command line string that it's generating. So you can see our solution name, the framework that we've picked, our component name and description, and then it's automatically added the skip install for us. If I want to see it running in the window, I can launch that there. What the project will do on the back end if we don't run that is it will generate a log file with everything that happened in the command window for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click Generate so we can start scaffolding out our project. And without the node
funny,
module,
I would just
go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, Eric. I was going to point out for those who are new to this, right? The npm. If I skip install now, when I press F5. It's similar to the NuGet package thing where it'll download on build. You can still get that command to run to do the actual downloading at debug time if you want.
Yeah, you absolutely can. Okay, so it's already done. Here you can see our log file where it's printed out the everything that it did in the Yeoman generator. Note this is exactly how it looks if you ran it from the command line. So it's created everything for us in our project. Here is my web part over under my source directory. And if I want to see the pre-generated code, I can just click on the TypeScript file, and here it is. So this is exactly how it would look if you were to open it up in VS Code and view one that you had run from the command line, only now it's included in a proper Visual Studio solution. Once you have this in place, there's a couple of different ways that you can work with it and get it to launch your project for the for testing in the Workbench. I'm going to skip over here to one that I've already created. This one, I ran through the full install, and you'll see the node modules folder is there. Now, I don't have it included in the project, and you typically wouldn't if you're checking this into source control, for example. You would make running the npm install part of your build process, say an MS build on your TFS server, to pull everything down. There's no reason to have those 20,000 odd files as part of your base solution structure. So to run it, it's as simple as just clicking Start, because in the configuration for the project, we automatically include the Start External Program with the command line options that we need to run gulp serve. So from here, just clicking Start will launch the web browser and should take me directly into the workbench. Here you can see it running the command to do the gulp serve. And in just a moment, it will execute all of those commands as it gets up and running here, and throw me into my web browser so that I can test it out in the workbench. There it goes.
Yep. And part of what it's doing, right, again, it's transpiling TypeScript into JavaScript. It'll do the SASS, SCSS processing. That's all part of the default framework toolchain. Again, we just play in that party.
And obviously, the time that this takes is dependent on the machine which you're using. So,
all right, so there it goes. It wires it up. I should get a certificate error saying it doesn't trust my developer certificate here. There it goes. So if I click details here, and I can just go onto the web page, there's a command you can run to trust that certificate automatically. So you don't run into that every time. And so here's web part 1, and I can add it into my workbench. And now I have it in my test environment. If I have any tests for mock data or whatnot, that'll show up in here as well as any if I have any options over here in the edit panel. So all of that is working properly as it should in the web browser. Now, there's another option for launching this, and that is to use the Task Runner Explorer in Visual Studio. So let me get rid of the external program bit here. I'll save that. And now back into my web part solution, if I go to View Other Windows, I can bring up the Task Runner Explorer. If you're not familiar with this, this is designed specifically for these type of modern web experiences that have Node and Gulp and all that stuff in the background. It'll work with different packaging managers. But what it's going to do is it's going to analyze what's in our Gulp file to see what tasks we have included. And out of the box, as you can see here down at the bottom, we have the standards, the build, clean. There's even one to deploy to Azure Storage. If we come down here to Gulp Serve, we can right-click, bind to that, which makes a slight modification to our Gulp file for Serve, so that it automatically binds if you want to run these from the command line. I can also do a run. It'll launch the window here. You can see that it's running the serve command, runs through the same set of operations that we did just a minute ago. And that will launch, there it goes, launching our web browser and right into the workbench.
Really cool stuff. And I really like the way it's integrated, the experience in the Visual Studio as well. So if you prefer to do SharePoint framework development using this kind of a model, absolutely this is a suitable way of doing that. If you prefer to stay in Visual Studio Code or whatever alternative editors, that's absolutely fine as well. But this is a great, Visual Studio is really improving on this side as well. I think 2015 wasn't this capable. 2017 is clearly much more flexible from this perspective.
One more thing that I should mention is once you have a project scaffolded, we also include an item template so that you can do right-click, add new item. And that will allow you to add a web part here. So here's my SPFX web part template, and I can choose web part 3 3, I'll name it here. It pops our generator window again, but notice this time we don't have as many options because we're not scaffolding up a full project. So I can say web part 5, another web part, whatever I want to call it here. Same advanced option to control the command line and the command window. Skip install is missing because that's not necessary when you're doing an item. This one runs pretty quickly. It'll run up and scaffold. There's my log to show that it's been deployed, and here is my new web part that gets added to my solution. So now I have multiple web parts here in this one, and I can modify those as need be, put all this into source code, test it in the workbench, and so on and so forth. So a very standardized Visual Studio experience for adding new items.
Absolutely. And then obviously in the future, when we're introducing additional components and capabilities in SharePoint framework, we'll keep on evolving this extension as well, adding those additional file types or item types in the extension as well. So great starting point for a great journey on the Visual Studio extension side. Good.
Paul, you want to talk about how we can get folks in the community to contribute?
Yeah, that would be great, right? So obviously we have our first initial start here. There's lots of things that can be done. Beth has talked about enhancements that the product group might be considering. I've already mentioned help me do React components. What else is there? What other things do you need that might be helpful? Give us feature enhancements and obviously usage. And it's open source. It's in GitHub. So clone the repo, work away, send us a pull request. We'll certainly, we're open to all of those as well. Again, there's going to be a lot of documentation. There is the wiki is also a GitHub repo, and we certainly would love people who have more familiarity with the task runner or some of these other parts of the technology stack to help chime in with some documentation to help your fellow developers who are trying to get up to speed as well. Obviously, Eric and I are both American, speaking American English, so we can certainly use some help on different languages.
Well, you speak American English. I speak Texas English, which ain't the same thing. And then we do the English translation for Vessel as well.
Yeah, we can do the Finglish translation, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we would definitely like
and again,
contribute on that point.
Yes. And of course, spread the word. Use this within your team. Sit down, get together with your team. Obviously, showing them this recording would be a wonderful first start, and we're certainly open to getting out there. I'll be talking about this at upcoming conferences and SharePoint Saturdays around, and we'll certainly get the word out, and we would love for you to do that with us as well.
Well, we'd also like to thank Besson and the team there for allowing us to put this into the PnP initiative so that it gets wider exposure. That is a community effort. I talk to a lot of folks who don't realize that they can contribute to PnP and all the various branches and things that are out there and available for that. And so we welcome that same level of participation here. And because we're working closely with that team going forward, we will continue to update this for things coming from that side. But we'd also love to see contributions from the community side on ways that you're using this, things that you can integrate in, as Paul mentioned, things like React components and various other plugins that we can see adding to these utilities. So by all means, communicate with us, drop issues in if you find problems, update the wiki, let us know where you find issues and opportunities for enhancements. We'd love to hear from the community.
Absolutely. And this is, like mentioned, this is a great start for the extension, but it's only a start. There's an interesting scenarios which we can already visualize or vision for the future for this one. And if there's a high usage on this one, then there's high interest of evolving that as well. So absolutely, we absolutely welcome people to contribute on this one. But I think that sums up the webcast for this time. We didn't have anything extra to talk about, right?
Not from our side.
Cool. So Thank you, Eric and Paul, absolutely on the great start on the extension, and thanks for joining on the webcast as well. It is a great tool. Super excited on this one. And we hopefully see additional community members contributing and participating on this journey. Any last words from you guys?
From my perspective,
sharing.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of going to say the same thing in a lot more words, but yeah, I'm really interested to see how people react to this and what type of feedback we get. We'd love to hear it all, positive and negative, and so feel free to reach out. I think everyone probably knows how to get a hold of us by now, but reach out to myself or Paul or Vesa. We'll be at all the normal conferences and things where you would expect to see us. So please do give us your feedback and let us know your thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you, guys, and we'll come up with a new webcast sooner or later. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.